Hello everybody. While I wait for Ken to get back, I'm Tom Donohue. I'm head of strategy. I've been there, done that. Been there, done that is a strategic, creative consultancy. Our kind of thematic pitch to the world is we have the world's best people to solve your toughest and most interesting problems, whether that be brand strategy, creative strategy, innovation, etc. I know we'd much rather hear from Ken than me. Everyone knows Ken, he was just here talking, he was really great, but now the questioner has become the questionee. First of all, Ken, it's been a marquee year for people called Ken. How have you dealt with that wave of attention?
It's been a lot of pressure, I'll tell you that, right? So it's a great question. I haven't heard that one before.
He is more than just Ken today. Okay, fantastic. Well, we're here to talk about reimagining the future of sports, and I think there is going to be a lot of continuity, maybe a little repetition from what we just heard, but there is no one better placed than Ken to talk about this topic in his role. He is super close to sports, franchises, but even closer to fans, which I think is such an enormous part of what makes the sports industry so important and why we have so much to learn from it as marketers broadly. So, first up, do you have a team in the race this weekend? Who are we picking?
That's a tough one given where we are. So I'll say that I fancy the energy drink company.
Okay.
But that's me.
Shall not be named. What has your journey been in sports marketing up until this point? How did you end up at Fanatics? Why was that the right gig for you? Just a short little version.
It's a great question. I realized I just started talking. I didn't really introduce myself to most of you who I haven't met. Some of you have met before. So I am Ken Turner. I'm the CMO of Fanatics Collectibles. I've been on the Fanatics team for about 8 months. Previous to that, I was the CMO over at Red Bull, which is an amazing organization from a marketing standpoint as well. I actually started off in finance. I was a finance dude. I was a bean counter. I still love Excel, but it just wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do. What fascinates me about a journey, and most of us in this room, because I realize not all of us are marketers, is there is a unified passion for a consumer, an audience, a fan, and spectator. And that's what marketing is. We're great storytellers. So my career journey has been from storytelling to storytelling. And one of those aspects, one of the best aspects to me was a pit stop, so to speak, at Red Bull, which has become kind of a world-class with respect to marketing. And so I mentioned this to someone earlier. I don't know if everyone knows kind of the remit that is Red Bull and the remit that is marketing. Everyone kind of knows the experiences, the extreme things, the amazing content. I don't know how many people know that Red Bull actually has a records organization. They have a records company. They've been nominated for 5 Grammys in the last kind of, I'd say 3-4 years. They've won like 8 Emmys from the content that they've developed. All kind of circle around this fan, this audience, this spectator, this consumer. Once you start to think of yourself as an organization that is focused on fan-centric, then it really bleeds in the execution that you have. So, amazing organization. I told someone this earlier, working with Red Bull is amazing, but it's kind of like driving on the highway in the Midwest. And I don't know if you're from the Midwest, I'm from Wisconsin. There's just not a lot of curves. There's not a lot of hills. It's just kind of straight, right? And so there's things you can do every now and again to change your trajectory, but I mean, you're going 80 and there's no one else there, which again is an amazing feeling. But at some point you want to help build things in, and hence the opportunity to go hang out with the folks at Fanatics, which right now, what we're trying to do at Fanatics is really build this ecosystem that is fan-centric, integrated, to really make sure that we understand the needs of the fan, support the fan, and surround them with programming that allows them to elevate their experience as a fan. Thanks for your question. I probably over-answered.
No, yeah, that was great. I didn't expect the Wisconsin reference, but cool. You know, I think arguably
no one expects Wisconsin reference.
See that coming. Arguably, I think that the truth about Red Bull is it's not that they're amazing at marketing. It's just that they're amazing, and they've almost taken the word marketing out of the ecosystem that they work in, because actually what they're trying to do is amazing things, which in and of themselves are the marketing.
Yeah, it's a lifestyle.
Yeah.
That's kind of the way that team would approach it.
So I'd love to talk to you about sports meets marketing and the future of sports in two ways. The first is what is happening in sports, in that sporting arena, and the way they are groundbreaking, pushing the boat out that we can all learn from. And then equally, how can marketers who aren't in sports infiltrate and embed themselves within that sporting culture in more profound and interesting ways? I think you mentioned it's not enough that the CEO wants to slap the badge on a PGA tour. What are some of the new, more interesting ways to interact with sports? So I'll kick off with the biggest question of all, the sports industry today and its future. How are you defining that sports industry? It can mean a lot of things. What do you see it as?
It can. I would say at Fanatics, we try to simplify and really, I'd say break it down into maybe three. There's the core sport, and that is a league, that is a team. That is like what Hugo talked about with UFC. There are brands and organizations that are sport adjacent. I would say that Fanatics blends the line between sport adjacent and sport, but an Adidas, a Nike, sport adjacent. And then, even though it's overly simplified, here's everyone else who has an opportunity to play in and pay into sport and do so in very authentic ways. I don't know if any of you have had an opportunity to take a look at the F1 kind of setup, and a lot of you got here today, but if you get a chance to walk over and see some of the activations, they are really good. And I would say the ones that are the best ones are the ones who aren't naturally in sports. The American Express execution is really, really good. The Coca-Cola execution is really, really good. So what they've done is they've had an opportunity to take something that is a big moment, a big maybe cultural moment, and then leverage their brand with authenticity to create activation and experiences for the fans. So those are kind of the three areas that we would define sports.
Yeah, great. I mean, I feel I'm sort of old enough to remember people with a deep sense of foreboding talking about the death of live sports and fandom, as in it was something of the past. But I think in the last 5 or 10 years, we've seen this enormous growth, an enormous amount of innovation. So what do you think created that sports for a new generation shift? Like, why is it more engaging, more addictive, more obsessive than it ever has been?
Yeah, it is hard for something to go away when the underpinning is irrationality, if that makes sense. So let me define. So from the fan is the consumer, fandom is the act. When we think about fans and fandom, it's a community unified through passion, unified through tradition, unified through purpose, with, I always say, a little hint of irrationality. Just think about your favorite squad, your favorite team, your favorite moment. Let's just say it's football. I'm a big Steelers fan. I wear the same socks every Sunday. That is not rational, right? But I mean, you are smiling because you have that kind of same moment when maybe you're a rugby fan and you hear the haka from the All Blacks. Maybe you're an Arsenal fan and you hear the song of North London when they sing it, right?
Don't let me sing it.
That means something, right? So that's a little bit of irrationality. So with that as context, I think what's happened now is we as marketers have understand that there's emotion tied to that, and it was mentioned earlier on the passion. And where there's emotion, there's an amazing and a beautiful story that can be told. Passion, rationality, emotion, story, all of those is kind of fuel for the fire that starts growth within an industry.
And it's interesting you talk about it like that, because I see too, I think in that endless search for identity and community that is happening in this ever-changing, ever-atomizing world, sports actually, like you said, represent that through line of tradition, shared passion, shared irrationality, which is things that kind of united us in various ways, previously that they're not today. So what else is changing, shifting in culture and the culture of fandom that you see in sports as really being able to take advantage of and work with?
I would say two things, really more from a marketing and execution standpoint. The first is content. The ability and sophistication to deliver content in a compelling way has kind of changed the landscape, especially for those of you who are deep into sports. Pick a podcast, any podcast, they're all great with respect to the story. It could be Pivot, it could be Club 520, it could be Pat McAfee. It's great content that is compelling. So being able to deliver content, not only in long form, but now short form, in a way that it's short enough for people to be engaged and the audience to be engaged, but exciting enough to keep them coming back. So content becomes extremely important. The second piece is experiences. We can point to the experiences that you see a brand like Ripple do, or does, but you can also point to the experience that leagues are starting to do. If you, Hugo told me a little bit about UFCX, which sounds like an amazing execution that happens here in Vegas in July. If you've ever been to an NFL draft, it is an amazing experience. There are people who are waiting hours to hear one name. So those experiences and how do you ignite those experiences, to me, that's kind of changed the game because it allows the consumer, the fan, the audience, the spectator to actually be part of something, and then it really ties into the emotion that we talked about earlier.
And you're right, and so much happens off the field, off the golf course, off the cricket pitch, whatever, and I think obviously social media is one huge medium. It's just opened up that ability that the story just travels in between those kind of marquee sporting moments, and the story becomes as interesting as the game itself.
Yeah, for real. And the other thing with that is, it kind of gets to the conversation we had earlier, those stories need to be authentic. I mean, I can tell stories about how we've tried to develop the viral story. It just never works. Maybe it works every now and again, but some of these things just happen natural. So you have to make sure that your team's in a position to tell that story when the story comes, and not necessarily force the story so that it can become engaging.
Another sort of major part, and I think this is sort of true of everything, of lines blurring and verticals not being what they once were. I think the interaction of sports and culture, where sports is culture, sports is music, sports is fashion, and vice versa. So how do you see that kind of melding of all of those different kind of formerly separate cultural touch points kind of coming together under the sporting banner?
Yeah, so I'll use a very rudimentary definition of culture, because culture can mean so many different things, and I'll just call it fashion, music, games, for the sake of this discussion. Later we can talk about different definitions of culture. I say that the intersection between sports, culture, the way that I just defined it, has always been there. I mean, you can go back to kind of the history of maybe take boxing and realize the fashion undertone that's happened there, the audience and the musicians that happen to be there. So it's always been there. I'd say the one thing that's happened that's interesting as kind of again, fuel to the fire is there's an intersection between sports, culture, and now I'll call it technology, because the technology allows for the amplification. The overlap. If you're an NBA fan, there's always the outfit of the day, right? You kind of come through and you see the folks walk into the locker room and everyone wants to know what the fit is. And so that's, to me, that's the amplification that's happening.
And the immediacy of that,
Yeah,
the interactivity with it.
100%. Yeah.
Question, what's your opinion on Taylor and Travis?
Okay. I think it's been great from a business perspective. I mean, I don't know if y'all follow Fanatics, but that Taylor stuff, it's selling out. You can't keep that in stock, which is kind of amazing. I don't know. Like, to me, there's two sides to that. There's one that is that a culture vulture moment from the NFL? Like, we have to be careful with balancing authenticity as well as balancing what we kind of get paid to do, which is drive top line and potentially bottom line. My role as a marketer is to make sure that we are authentic. And so if we're going to leverage that, and if I'm working for the NFL, how do we do so in an authentic way? But you can't hide or ignore the facts that it's been very lucrative for all parties involved. Now it's just, and at that point in time, I don't know if I care as much about how someone thinks about it if it's really driving as much as it is.
Yeah, and I think there's a good job in the way of playing with it as this cultural moment. I think you're right, the tide might turn when it starts to look like kind of naked monetization, and suddenly it's a less of a kind of a cultural shared moment and more of a exploited moment. So sports organizations, you obviously are very intimately connected with Rebel. Who else do you feel is doing just that amazing job of pushing boundaries and moving things forward?
From a league standpoint, well, I mean, I say Fanatics is doing an amazing job, but that's, I'm biased just in terms of the way that the team has integrated things. From a league standpoint, I've always been impressed with the NFL and things that they've done from an overall execution to surround themselves with the fan. I'm also impressed from a kind of that third bucket, P&G. P&G had a campaign a couple of years ago called These Hands. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a child with his dad playing catch, and he wants to go to the NFL. And then the dad starts to explain how those hands can get you to the NFL, but they can also get you to be a doctor, can get you to be a sports agent, can get you to be so many different things. So it's a nice little kind of collection where P&G, with their relationship with the NFL, it's kind of a way to use these athletes in a way that made sense for kind of a higher reading.
You mentioned athletes, that was something I wanted to talk about. It's actually, how is that power shift affecting this whole world? Where athletes are now not just representatives, not just kind of stars, but they are businesses, moguls, creative forces in their own right. So what do you think the future of that looks like? What do athletes start to own in this ecosystem?
Some of the athletes are brands, and they are good. Like Fanatics has a roster of 3,567 athletes. And that top echelon, the folks who have their own brands, their own brand teams, their own content houses, they are amazing at what they do. From an organization or a brand perspective, what we need to do is understand what their brand is, how do we support, and where 1 + 1 = 3 in terms of what we're looking to deliver in a way that is authentic to a fan. And I think you'll see more brands of athletes and more athletes seeking to become brands. And that's also another area where we as organizations can play, because not everyone has a team like a LeBron James or Kevin Durant, but some of these athletes have an aspiration to do those things, and that's an opportunity for some of us brands where we actually have expertise in that to offer that to the athletes.
Great. So speaking about that sort of that interactivity with sports people, sports properties, what is it that brands that aren't ostensibly in that world or don't have that kind of sporting credibility, what ways would you advise them to interact with sports in a way that means they show up in a kind of powerful way, not a sports vulture way, as it were?
That's a great question. Can I just pause for a second? Am I good on time? I don't want Pearl to yell at me later. I've done this before, and I just yelled at it before. See, I'll tell you what not to do as a brand that is looking to enter sports that doesn't have a sports background. I would say it's very difficult to sponsor without getting something that is authentic to your brand. Like we talked about it earlier. Placing a logo on a bag or placing a logo on a shirt or a jersey is very difficult to execute without the follow-up, because then it's like, why are you there? What's the purpose? What's your reason for being? If you have no sports aptitude whatsoever, then we should probably have a side conversation of why you're actually getting into sports, right? Like, so that's just the real conversation to have. If you have no sports aptitude but you desire, then I think there are great agencies you can work with. It's like anything else. It's a build or buy discussion. And then you determine what you're good at, what your economies of scale and scope are, and then determine if this is an area that you want to build. I would tell you the investment, not necessarily from a dollars, but from a people resource standpoint, can be intensive. If you're going from zero and you're trying to get like a Fanatics, that's just a lot. I mean, if we look at Fanatics, it's 2023 now. Fanatics was formed in 2011. So it's taken a decade for us to get to where we are, and now we are where we are, and we continue to move forward. But it wasn't easy, and I won't tell you the numbers. You can Google it and see the investment that was required in order to get here.
Yeah, and I think, and to the point of working with and in sports, to some of the conversation was happening up here just before, it's about what you can give to it, not what you can take from it. So the experiences you're creating, the new abilities you're putting in consumers' hands, those become a much bigger part of the story than the badge on a hat.
Well said.
Okay, I presume I've got no sense of time in life in general, so we've got 5. Okay, well, I'd rather these lovely people have a chance to speak to you rather than me. I will ask you this, what is, 5 years from now, what does not just the Fanatics experience look like, but what does the fan experience look like? How is that going to transform?
I think it's storytelling that starts with the story of the fan. Right now you see a lot of great, like if you've seen like the documentaries of The Last Dance with the Michael Jordan and the Bulls, that's an amazing story. I think 5 years from now we'll tell the last Dance from the viewpoint of the fan who happened to be there. I think that's an amazing story. I think it's relatable, and I think that's what you'll start to see.
Love that. Great. Any more for any more? Who wants to talk to Ken? Oh wait, we did this. Let's go through it again.
Yeah, hi, Dan from Iris. This question might actually evolve a bit because you've already shared so much this last hour or so, but you're on the collectible side of Fanatics, which is different from apparel and some of those things. How do you see the collectible market and even those individuals evolving?
They are a passionate group, really passionate and protective group when it comes to trading cards and anything that is collectible. I mean, it's amazing. I would see that it's a group that hasn't always been, I'd say with all due respect, open to having others join, and I think we're changing that. So I think what you'll start to see is there are different levels of collecting. There are people who will collect things for the extrinsic value, which is obvious, but there are people who collect things for intrinsic value. I think what we'll do is we'll highlight the emotion and the memories. And I've shared this before, but I have 2 things that are, from my perspective, a collection that are important to me. The first thing is my Jordan 6s, which isn't a great Jordan, by the way, if any of you like Jordans, but it's the first Jordan I was able to buy with my own money. So, like, I probably have 7 pairs of Jordan 6s, and they all look the same, and they will never be worn. And then the other is I have a Jim Brown jersey. So it just means one of those things. Again, the same thing. It's the first thing I was able to buy from a collecting standpoint. So highlighting those stores will allow us to increase the number of collectors in the category.
Appreciate you.
Got it.
Hi. You know, you mentioned that Amex and Coke had great activations here, and I'm just curious, like what made them great? What makes a great activation?
What's your name, friend?
My name's Brandy. I'm with Eileen Fishing.
Thank you for that. So the first thing is they paid attention to what they offered, like we talked about earlier, and who they are. They didn't try to be F1. They tried to be American Express, who happens to be a partner of F1 or the brands that they're supporting. So first was the authenticity and staying true to the brand. The second is what they offer is very true to their offering. But how can you use American Express at an F1 event? How can Coke and the benefit of Coke benefit you here at an F1 event? So they played into that, but they made sure that they understood the context of where you were and where you are. And then the experience overall, high quality that you would expect from both of those brands, consistent, and I would say leave a memory structure. So when I leave, I think about Coke and I think about American Express.
It's kind of like, don't crash the party, throw the party.
Yeah, and even if it's not your party, you can still be the life of the party, like you are.
Hi, Corinne from Active.
What's the name again?
Corinne.
Corinne, got it.
Tom, you were talking about the death of live sports and the hand-wringing that was happening 5-10 years ago, and I think it kind of boiled down to people were freaking out that Gen Z wasn't interested in sitting down and watching a football game for an hour, appointed viewing. Do you find that from a collectible standpoint, like, are young people collecting differently or less, or is it just, how is that changing?
It's a generational hobby. What's interesting is I collect if my older sibling or my parent has collected. And so what we found is there are parents who are introducing their children into the hobby. What's fascinating to me, which is a bit different here domestically than internationally, trading cards and collecting is actually part of some of the school's curriculum to teach the kids how to do math, which again, wild in terms of the way that you would think about it. So it's really a generational hobby. Where we are able to provide a little bit more reach and amplification is through social. So how do you tell an interesting story around a collector, a collection, with someone who happens to be a fan of an individual or a fan of a sport, so that it makes sense, and then we elevate their experience. Got it.
It's sort of a 30,000-foot question, but you have Formula One coming into the States. The NFL is always the highest rated program, live program on television, and everything that everybody in the room knows. Is there an insatiable appetite in your mind going forward for sports through all the different avenues, be it collectibles, be it streaming watching, being it linear watching, being it whatever, now that it's morphed into culture and entertainment plus sports? Is it just going to continue to rise and rise in your viewpoint, or is there a bit of a plateau that could happen?
I think it will continue to rise in the short term, as long as there is that element of irrational behavior, that the uniform of where passion meets community. I think you'll continue to see, and the opportunity to tell stories, I think it will continue to grow. What will be interesting, and we can talk about this later, is how that grows from a media standpoint. As teams desire to own their own media rights, as leagues desire to build their own networks, as Netflix, as an example, tries to get into live programming. Prime's already done it with the NFL and some of the other things. Like, I think that's the interesting piece. Like, how will these things all play together? And as a consumer, as a fan, which avenue will I choose in order to elevate my experience? I think we'll all be kind of one touch. I want to be able to pick up my phone and do whatever it is I want. And I think the first pick of the trough will be successful on that.
Cool. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Ken.